Hey everybody, it's Alex from Heavy New York. We are doing our first ever interview at Terminal 5, and we are doing things on a great note. We are here with Manuel of Zeal Ardor. Thank you for your time.
Dude, cheers. Thanks for yours.
Yeah, of course. It's so great to have you back. A Music Hall of Williamsburg back in the fall was awesome, and it's great to have you on this killer lineup with Deaf Heaven and Baroness.
Yeah, it's an absolute treat. Everybody's really nice. John just went by and made a face. That's why I laughed earlier. But yeah, it's all good.
That's awesome. But you're well into the record cycle for Stranger Fruit. Do you just want to give like a rundown on how the making of the record and the record cycle has been thus far?
Sure, yeah. With Stranger Fruit, we kind of had time to actually think about what we wanted to do, and it's a little betterly put together, I'll say, and a little bit of word there. Also, like the production was nice because we had the chance to work with the likes of Kurt Ballou and Alan Duches who did the mastering. So it's more cohesive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Was conceptually Stranger Fruit intended to be just a direct follow-up to Devil Is Fine, or do you think that Stranger Fruit kind of stands out in its own entity?
Both. I think it would be weird just to like cut off all the connections to the prior stuff. But I wanted to make an album that you could just listen to from start to finish and have like a good experience. So I think it's a little column A, a little column B.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, what I find so interesting about Zeal Ardor is that there's so many different elements in your music, from black metal to folk metal to some death metal and soul. Was this coming from taking just inspiration from many different sources, or was it Zeal Ardor kind of intended to be that way?
I think it's just what makes most fun. I think like it's never like forced. Like I need some death metal in this right now, but it's just what kind of organically happened in the writing process, and it's literally just what seems most fun to me that I put into the music.
Awesome. Does that make it a little bit easier to try new things when making new music because your music already is so experimental?
Definitely. Like we have a lot of leeway and like a lot of freedom, and we do take advantage of that because we'd be silly not to.
Yeah. Of course. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was reading up on you guys that Zeal Ardor was kind of intended to be a real solo project for you, but collaborating with different members and stuff, has that allowed you to broaden your horizons musically as well?
Immensely actually. A lot of for instance, one of the singers is heavily into doom. Our bassist Mia is like a stoner metal girl, and that all bleeds into the whole shebang. Yeah.
And I feel like by having so many different sounds, you could play with many different bands as well, right?
That's the funniest thing. Like we get interesting bills, to say the least. We can play pop festivals in Europe, and like we can go on tour with Behemoth, and it kind of works still.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah. Have you noticed like a different reaction depending on the crowds you're playing with?
Yeah, I mean, especially at festivals, people don't have to give a shit about you, so you kind of have to win them over first, and I kind of love that challenge because it keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Now, as somebody who's seen you live before, I think for me, it's a completely different experience seeing you guys live versus listening to you on my headphones or the CD or whatever. For you, how different is it playing live versus like in the studio?
Like you said, it's a whole different beast. I mean, also just because there's 5 more people on stage who are just as, if not more aggressive than me, it just makes it all kind of fiercer. And I think that's also the reason we put out a live record. It's just that we wanted to document the aggression and the energy that we have live versus the tame studio version. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is playing live maybe a little bit more organic than when you're in the studio, kind of, because, everything is so cohesive and you're interacting with the crowd?
Definitely. Like in the studio, you just do like an isolated bass thing, and that's that. You never think about how the audience is reacting. You never feed off that energy that a live audience just carries with it. So it is way more organic. Yeah.
Now when it comes to songwriting, I've always thought that songwriting is a completely separate talent in itself from just being able to play an instrument. So for you, how different is the songwriting process? A little bit more difficult than maybe playing live or vice versa?
It used to be that the live element was way harder for me because that's not what I'm used to. I'm used to like dwelling in a basement and recording into a computer. But with time and experience, I kind of like it's kind of even now. Yeah. But there was a discrepancy not too long ago. Yeah.
In what way?
I just get fucking nervous. I still get nervous before I go on stage, but Also, just like a stage presence is not something that people organically have. I believe it's something that you learn, and it's basically like this sociopathic thing where you kind of try to control people a little bit, and that's something you have to learn, or at least I did.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it works both ways. Like the crowd feeds off the band, and the band feeds off the crowd. Right?
Yeah, definitely. But what do you do with that? I mean, do you like take it, and are you just kind of overwhelmed by it, or do you like give it back? And that's something I kind of had to learn the hard way.
Really?
Yeah. Couple of shows, not with Zeal Ardor, but like prior bands, were not the best. I will say that.
Yeah, well, like you said, it is something that you have to learn over time.
Exactly.
But I think in the end, it's also there's a natural talent that comes with it as well, right? I mean, especially if you're from the hardcore scene where everybody's jumping on stage and everything like that.
Yeah, I guess for some people there is that natural element. I was not that person.
Yeah. Now, what I'm curious about is, in addition to writing, composition with your music, there's also lyrics that you have to take in mind. Do you need to hear music to come up with lyrics, or is there a time where maybe like a subject matter or a concept maybe determines the outcome of the composition?
They're kind of independent of each other. Sometimes I write something down that I just find interesting or like moving in a weird way. And sometimes, I listen to a track and kind of associate something with it. But I don't think that there's a huge correlation between the two for me.
Do you like to leave your lyrics open to interpretation, or are you maybe like trying to engage the listener in a certain message or point of view?
The way I see it is that someone who listens to my lyrics will never have, or, understand them the same way I do. Like they have a total different image in their heads, and that's just as valid as my idea. So I like to keep it not vague, but still ambiguous, that there's room for other ideas there.
Awesome. Could maybe a fan's perception of your music maybe give you a new perspective on your music as well?
Potentially, but I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm very reserved about reading other people's interpretations because that might influence me in weird ways. So I isolate myself in that regard.
Maybe the weird way could open up even more ideas in the future.
Yeah, maybe. Stay tuned for the jazz record, man. It'll be sick.
Hey, I could see jazz fans appreciating Zeal Ardor.
I don't see myself appreciating jazz fans, though. No, I'm kidding.
You ever see the movie Whiplash?
Yeah, not my cup of tea.
When that movie first came out and the drum tech was sound testing, I heard so many people just scream, "Not my fucking tempo!"
Yeah.
And now another question I was really curious about is coming from Switzerland. There's great, bands from Switzerland such as Dream Shade, Elevite, Triptychon. Was there a scene in Switzerland that Zeal Ardor kind of started in, or did you have to go outside your hometown to get the name out there more?
It's weird. I mean, first of all, since the internet thing happened, people outside appreciated prior to people inside of Switzerland, and you're never like the king of your own country. I think there's always this skepticism of, oh, you're from here, dude. Like, don't even try. So I think that's still very much a thing. So there was not a scene that we could be elevated by. It's elevated. It's all external stuff.
Okay. But, I figure with a lot of... because Switzerland is close enough to Germany, Italy, Austria, and France that maybe you guys traveled there a lot as well.
Exactly. That's what we did. We got to play all sorts of festivals. And then after that happened, like, people inside the country were like, oh, maybe this isn't that shit. And that's... and then we got some gigs. Yeah.
So before we go, I'd like to thank you so much for your time. It's going to be an awesome show tonight. Is there just, Stranger Fruit is... over a year old now, I think, and you have the Live in London record, a live record out now. Is there just anything new we could be expecting from Zeal Ardor in terms of new music or tours, if you're allowed to say?
Well, if you're watching from Poland, which I doubt, we're going to tour that region of the world with Behemoth in fall.
Oh, awesome.
That's going to be quite the fun ride, yeah.
Awesome. What about new music?
New music, nothing that I'm legally allowed to talk about, but... that means something, I guess. Yeah. So, yeah.
I got some ideas. You'll tell me when I turn the camera on.
Yeah. There's nothing.
Well, Manuel, thank you so much.
Cheers, dude.
Everybody, we are here with Manuel of Zeal Ardor, Stranger Fruit. Pick it up if you haven't already, and be sure to check out the Live in London record as well. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York. Cheers.